Hey everyone, it's Helen from S&B Deal Hunter. Today we have Aaron Harper with us, who owns Rolling Suds, one of the fastest growing franchises that specializes in power washing. I'm very excited to hear Aaron's story. Aaron, it's great to have you on today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, Helen. Thanks for asking me.
Well, Aaron, look, I want to hear about your background. How did you get into power washing and franchises?
Yeah, sure. I came from Hollywood, so absolutely nothing to do with franchising. Worked on the business side, managing actors and writers and directors, working with Academy Award winning actors. Realized I didn't like any of the people I was working for, and I didn't want anything that they had. Decided to get into sales, kind of figure out what I wanted to do. A buddy of mine said, you should get into franchise development. Didn't know what that was. Loved the idea of helping people become business owners. Um, I, like many, thought that franchising was just McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. Um, but there's this whole world of like boring businesses that are franchises, like ServPro and Stanley Steamer and these different brands. Loved that. So started working for a carpet cleaning company, helped grow that, effectively prepare that brand for exit to a private equity backed restoration company that wanted to get into franchising. They bought us but put us in charge of their division. Um, and said go find other brands. We basically have an unlimited amount of capital to deploy. My boss found a brand in the drywall repair space that had grown to 100 locations, a total of 40 franchisees. The founder exited immediately and they put it in my lap. And I was the first full time employee. And they were like, sell this. And I'm like, well, hold on. So I called all the franchisees and only a handful of them were happy. So we hired a brand president and we built systems around everything the franchisees needed. We launched our first franchise. This was all happening in COVID, by the way. We launched our first franchise at the end of 2020. He was profitable month one with all the systems we put into place, and knew nothing about drywall repair, had a full-time skilled laborer hired, and he had jobs on the calendar before going to training. So um, we grew that in 2 years. I added 223 locations to that business in 24 months. And we became the biggest drywall repair company in the world. And uh, and so that company came to me and they were like, "Hey, we want you to take on this other brand that we're going to turn into a franchise. We actually just want you to do it, and it's not a franchise yet; it's in the storage space. And we'll double your salary and give you a really fancy title." And I was like, "Wait a minute, I can do this on my own." So much like a lot of your audience members, I decided to go out and look for a business that I could franchise. So instead of entrepreneurship through acquisition, I was looking to franchise through acquisition. So looking for a kind of a boring residential and commercial service business that was non-franchised that I could acquire the franchise rights and build a franchise system around. Looked at HVAC and plumbing and solar and tree care and a bunch of different businesses. After looking at 2 dozen, I met the founders of Rolling Suds in September of 2022. It was the best business that I looked at. It was the only one that checked all the boxes for me. Um, I raised capital from people in the franchise industry who could provide mentorship in addition to capital, and acquired the franchise rights in January of last year, January of 2023. We started franchising at the end of February of 23, signed up our first franchise at the end of March. Um, we've turned away 59 operators who had the capital and weren't right. So it's close to $12 million in revenue just because I've been super selective on who comes in. And we've signed up 51 franchisees who have purchased 187 territories in 26 states since then. And the ones who have launched with 2 full-time employees hired prior to going to training. They are not doing the power washing themselves. They have a truck on the road, a physical location secured that has a warehouse space. And I have 27 team members that I've hired, 4 direct reports. Everyone else reports to them. And yeah, so we've grown an almost 200 unit franchise system in 14 months.
That's very, very impressive. I'm eager to learn more. I love, the term FTA, franchise through acquisition. I hadn't heard of that before, but super interesting. Instead of acquiring just the business outright, you went and acquired the franchise rights to a boring business. And I haven't interviewed anyone who's done that, so eager to learn more. I guess first, you mentioned Rolling Suds kind of checked all the boxes. You looked at a bunch of these existing businesses to figure out, what was franchisable. Can you just share more? Like, what did you like about Rolling Suds that sort of stood out, or what were the sort of the lists that you needed to check?
Yeah, so and I recommend anyone who decides to either start a business or buy a business do this because it'll take as much emotion away from the process, which, as you know, like emotion has no place in the acquisition, even though it's easier said than done. But like, so I needed something that was high margin, so 25% or higher, EBITDA margins, fragmented market. So something I believe that the more fragmented the industry is, the easier it is to disrupt. Um, I was looking for unskilled labor. Like just it's hard to recruit and unskilled skilled labor is really tough. Looking for something with a massive total addressable market. So a ton of customers. So we do both residential and commercial power washing. So every building that you drive by is a prospective customer. I wanted something that was recession resistant, so either had withstood the test of time, or felt had the capability to. It's a 34-year-old pressure washing business, so definitely met that. Something that was scalable. It was easy to open another location. Another location is just another truck, so the actual cash outlay to grow the business is not high. Um, and there were a couple things on there, so those were all like non-negotiables. And and then there were a couple things on my list that were like nice to haves, but not need to haves. And Rolling Suds was the only one that hit both of those. So um the first was a difference in product offering. So I wanted something where not only can I provide a better service in terms of the experience for the customer, but I also wanted a product that was better than the rest of the competitors out there. So people talk a lot about a moat. I was looking for a moat. And our founders over 34 years have perfected a way to clean buildings that's faster and more effective than anyone else. And it's all proprietary. So we can power wash 5 stories from the ground. We can do a 3,000 square foot house in 20 to 25 minutes, set up, tear down everything. And that's typically a $500 job done in 20 to 25 minutes. So the amount of money you can make per day, given this type of truck, is not anything else that I've been able to see. We have a much higher revenue per truck per year than any other power washers I've ever seen. Um, and so, the most obvious example for the entrepreneurship nerds out there of this happening to an industry would be the iPhone in 2007. Prior to that, it was just the Motorola BlackBerry or the Motorola Razr, the BlackBerry, and the Nokia brick phone. And the iPhone came out and like completely transformed the industry, and they built a multi-trillion-dollar company. The other thing that I was looking for that was hard to find um, was little to no competition in the franchise space. So, in my experience in franchising, there's always multiple franchise brands, and then there's local guys in every major market. And when I analyzed these other opportunities, that was the case. There were 5 to 10 other franchise brands doing the same thing. When I dug into the power washing industry in general, that didn't exist.
Wow.
Like there was there wasn't a national leader, there wasn't a regional leader. There's no Serve Pro of power washing. And so I basically saw an opportunity to build that. And so the obvious example of this is when 1-800 Got Junk came down the from Canada in the early 2000s. The junk business was before that. Junk business was just a dude that put junk in the back of his truck. And they showed that you could get paid $400 to pick up someone's junk and go drop it off somewhere. And all they had was like a wrapped vehicle and a polo on, and like they were nice to people. And they built $1 billion system wide sales company, and they paved the way for college hunks hauling junk and Junk King and Junk Luggers and J Dog Junk. But if you combine the size of all those brands, 1-800 Got Junk is bigger than all of them. And I do believe it has to do with them being first. And so we're currently doing to the power washing industry what 1-800 got junk did to the junk business in the early 2000s.
That's no, that's super interesting. Thanks for kind of explaining that. I'm curious when you were looking for, these businesses to potentially franchise, how did you or acquire the franchise rights for? How did you approach these? I guess they're not sellers, but I guess sellers or
None
partners.
of them were looking to sell.
Okay. Yeah. How did you find them? What were the conversations you had and how did you kind of pitch them? I'm curious how that went.
So it's actually like a really great deal for them, right? So like I'm trying to find people who don't want to franchise their business because it would take away from their business that they have. And they recognize that I don't want anything to do with that other business because it's going to be hard. It's going to cost a lot of money and I'm probably going to do it wrong. Like that's my perfect business owner is like I'm good at like my thing and like you go do your thing and I'll keep doing this and I'll help franchisees be good at the thing I'm doing, but like I want you to manage them and build the team and raise the capital and take all the risk. And so it's actually like I, I think the reason why searchers exist and there's search funds and it because it takes a while to find that perfect business where the founder's like ready to retire and it's a good business and there's not a bunch of issues with it and he still or she still wants to sell that business and that's why you have these 18-month search cycles. My pitch was, hey, you have a great business. I love your business. I want you to actually keep doing the thing you're good at, which is going to run your business. I'm going to build a different business. I'm going to do all this stuff, and you're going to have a piece of that business. And you get to keep 100% of your business, but we own the licensing rights and the trademarks and the systems and everything. And then when and if there's some type of liquidity event or distributions happen with this business, you get to participate in that. And so it's actually like a phenomenal deal for business owners. Now the risk is very few people end up doing what we just did with right. So like anyone could say they're going to franchise the business, but not actually have kind of the intellectual capital necessary or the actual capital to do it, right? It costs a lot of money to franchise a business. You also have to know what you're talking about and how to do it. But there's a lot more upside than downside in that situation. Um, so I just let everyone in my network know what I was doing. And I just had a ton of people that I was vetting, a ton of businesses that I was vetting.
That's super interesting. And I guess in this case, the sellers, or I don't know, would you call them sellers? Um,
Yeah, I mean, they're the founders of their business.
would the
And they're gonna
founders, oh, sorry to interrupt, would the founders still be able to sell their business? Or is the idea, okay, I already sold the license, like the licensing, the trademarks, the systems to this business, so I can no longer sell it. So I'm depending on these guys to really grow this thing.
no, I mean they can sell it, but that business would then become a franchise to whoever they sell it to. But what makes a lot more sense is to just sell it to us because we would just turn it into a corporate location and then they would get a multiple arbitrage. Um, because they're only going to get max, what, 3 to 5x EBITDA on their business, like max. Franchisor trades at 12 to 15, depending on how consistent the royalties are. And I mean, my intention is not to sell, like, we're going to hold for a really long time. Like, I'm not doing a build to sell type situation. But like, from their perspective, they get now, if they want out, like, we'll buy it and we'll integrate it into, and then they can go start another business. Like, it's a phenomenal deal for them.
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like, especially because a lot of these business owners probably like they would never go franchise their business to begin with.
Right, because franchising is a different business.
Totally.
And I talk a lot about responsible franchising because I believe that it you got to do things the right way that are in the best interest of franchisees and the franchisor. And the reason why franchises struggle a lot of the time is you have people that have power washing businesses that say I want to franchise and they don't know anything about franchising. And so this is a really unique situation where we have the experience with power washing because we've got 34 years of knowledge there, and the founders are actively involved in the franchise business, and then you have me with my experience scaling franchise systems. So we're operating like a very sophisticated franchise system, even though we're brand new.
Got it. And how big was the business, the existing business, when you acquired the franchise rights? Did
Yep.
they already have great systems and employees in place?
Yes.
What did that look like?
Yeah, so their business did in 2022. So I did the acquisition in January of 23. So a little over 2.2 million um with a 37% EBITDA margin. And that's after franchise fees. So so
Wow,
franchisees could buy in, still pay a royalty, and still be above, 30% EBITDA margins once they get up to multiple trucks. And so it was a killer business because I was like, you know, franchisor can make money, the franchisees can make money. Like this is replicable in every single market. Power washing is a need no matter where you go, particularly on the commercial side. Like we're big. I mean, we're majority commercial business, HOAs, apartment complexes, office buildings, restaurants, that kind of stuff.
that's great. And when you did find this business, like who did you raise capital from? Like I guess, how did you structure the deal with the sellers? You paid them cash up front as well as, I guess ownership into the franchise. And how did you pitch it to investors?
So I paid nothing for the business. I acquired the franchise rights for $0
Wow.
because the franchise wasn't created yet. So I'm creating a completely different entity. And any capital that I would need needs to go to that entity, not to the founders. Because remember, keep in mind, they keep 100% of their business. So like all I'm doing is acquiring the rights to that business. So I didn't pay anything. In fact, they contributed capital to the franchise because they wanted more equity. So I raised capital, I invested my own money, they invested, and then I found mentors of mine in the franchise space who have done this before multiple times with very successfully multiple times. So they could provide kind of mentorship in addition to capital. And that's how we did it. And then they get a minority stake in the franchise, the majority shareholder in the company. And now they have part ownership in a 187 unit franchise system.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty good deal. What I guess
I'd say so.
once you actually raise some capital, what did the money go towards? Like, what did that actually look like in terms of where that money went towards, and then how you then went in and started actually growing this part of the business out.
So people, the franchise, the model is you get paid royalties, right? And the goal is to have the royalties pay for the infrastructure. Well, initially, you don't have any royalties because franchisees take a while to ramp up with their business. I mean, it's usually a 10-year or more path to royalty self-sufficiency, um, depending on the franchise model. We're going to do it within probably 2 years. But that's because I've been so selective on who comes in, but we're only bringing in people who want to build massive businesses and have the capacity to do that. Um, so we signed up someone recently who had a $135 million exit after 4 years, raised 20 million, built a SaaS company. We signed up the largest fast signs franchisee that does $42 million a year. We've brought in like 11 C-suite executives that left that to come build, massive power washing business. And and so we're bringing in these really larger operators. So you need people to support the franchisees, right? And part of the struggle that franchisors often have is they don't have the capital to put the infrastructure in place to get the units profitable, basically. Um, so you have to bring in experts in training, in marketing, in finance, in sales, like and all of those people cost money. So the majority of my overhead goes to my staff. Um, And so we will have all of our franchisees open in every market that they purchased by July of this year. Um, so
Oh.
that's another struggle for a lot of franchisors is getting locations open, getting the trucks on the road. We've been really successful with that and plan to continue to do so. I mean, we're built right now from an infrastructure standpoint for a 400 unit network. I've been involved indirectly or directly with 14 brands, and not one of those brands that I've worked on has had 27 dedicated employees to the brand. And so we're like, when I say we're operating at a really high level right now, we are, but that's because I know what systems that we will break 2 years from now and what we need to do to make sure we don't break them.
No, that's super interesting. And how are you finding, these very qualified and experienced, operators to become franchisees?
So a lot of them follow me on Twitter.
Love it.
The majority of our franchisees have come from Twitter, and a lot of them were searchers that were like, all right, I've been looking for 12 months for this unicorn of a business. And the opportunity cost of looking for another 12 months is something that I need to kind of weigh in, or do I want to do that anymore? Um, and you could get into a Rolling Suds for like 400 or less, and that's like multiple territories, two trucks, a physical location, like everything that you would need to get started. And theoretically, I mean, you could build that business to two, three trucks within the first 2 years, is what our goals are for every franchisee. That's the development agreement that they sign when they open, where they're adding trucks, and we help generate leads for them, and provide all this infrastructure and support. But like, three trucks is an over $1 million business, with a 30 to 40% EBITDA
Yeah.
per our franchise disclosure document that we file every single year. And so, if you had a $1.5 million business cash flowing at a 30% margin that you were to buy, you'd pay a lot of money for that. I mean, you're paying over $1 million for the business if you're trading into two to three X. Um, Whereas you could get in. And so there's just like an opportunity cost. And so a lot of them are coming from the searcher community. I think it's also because like I resonate, my story resonates with them, because like ETA and FTA aren't too different. It's just creating a different business that is still a startup, but I'm taking a model that works and replicating it.
Yeah,
Um,
no, and you mentioned, let's say it takes a cost like 400K or less to get started. Are these franchisees financing that upfront, I guess, franchise startup
so
fee
they're
or
usually so they're usually coming in with either assets or capital um, to do that. So, our minimum liquidity requirement is 200 liquid, but they need to have the rest in liquidatable assets. So it can be home equity, it can be 401k rollovers, it can be stocks. Most of the operate like our net worth requirements a minimum of $900,000. So most of our operators have a higher net worth than that, and they're coming in um, because remember, they were thinking about taking out a $2 million personal guaranteed SBA loan potentially. And so you're talking about a pretty big, cash injection there. Um, and so yeah, so no, they've come in. A few have done home equity lines of credit, and a few have done 401k rollovers, which is where you can use your 401k without paying
taxes? Let me
taxes
see.
on it.
Yep.
And so we've got solutions for that. And then we finance the trucks with a vendor that we work with, and we have a couple like leasing partners. And so, opening a new location, which would be a truck, the down payment's like 35 grand, and then the payment monthly is like 2 grand. That truck does 2 grand per day. So like the economics really work from a scaling perspective.
Got it. And they're buying a territory as a certain sort of like geographic location. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we do a minimum of two territories because we're only looking for multi-unit operators, which is about 500,000 people, which is a pretty big chunk of population to add multiple trucks within.
Yeah.
And then most of our franchisees have purchased three,
Wow.
which is about 750,000 people.
That's fascinating. And what are, when they decide to sign on, what does that then look like for them? Like, how are you then supporting them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my thought when I was building this was like, what is the highest leverage thing for a franchisee to do? And how much support can I build so that they can just focus on that thing, right? And so the highest leverage thing for a franchisee to do on their business is be on the proverbial golf course with the property management company that owns 2,000 doors in their territories or manages 2,000 doors. Um, that's the highest leverage thing, right? So how do we build systems for everything else? So they hire and recruit a general manager in training prior to going to training, and they recruit a junior technician to work underneath him. That general manager in training, or GMIT as we call it, will run the truck, learn the truck, how to operationalize the truck. It's a pretty simple business model, so they elevate out of that role within the first 3 to 6 months. They promote junior technician is lead, and then they hire 3 new people when they add their next truck. So by month 7, they have 5 employees at least. Um, so we have recruiting tools that help give them resources on how to do that. We have marketing vendors that generate leads for franchisees. So we have 6 different vendors that we all centralize within what we call the Rolling Suds Lead Center. So there's outbound commercial marketing companies that generate outbound leads to property managers, and then other kind of commercial property jobs. Um, and then we have inbound residential leads that bring in inbound leads to the call center. We have a call center in Utah that answers the calls, books the appointments, so it's US based. We have a bookkeeping company that does their books. We have an insurance agency that helps them get insurance. We have real estate agents that helps them find their flex warehouse space. We build the trucks for them. We source the trucks for them. We provide the equipment. Um, we have chemical providers all across the country that they can plug into and get the chemicals that they need. We have all the print materials and the apparel. So we've created a shop. We give them all their mailers. I mean, like everything that they would normally need to figure out on their own, we've kind of bundled into a nice, you hear business in a box a lot in franchising. I'm not crazy about it because it seems like, but I'm not crazy about the term, but it is what we've done, more or less. And so they have about a 10-week ramp up process. And during that time, we turn leads on for them and we train them on how to run the business. So virtual trainings on how to estimate, how to price jobs out, how to do sales. And then for the whole month leading up to their launch, they're out 9 to 5 doing business development in their marketplace for 40 hours plus per week, filling the calendar. And like I said, we turn on those commercial leads before they go. Then when they go to training, we teach them the only thing we can't teach them virtually, which is how to run the truck. And they bring their general manager in training with them to training, and we oversee them teaching their employee how to run the truck. So it's a train the trainer model. And then on an ongoing basis, we have a business coach that they're partnered with. That they meet with weekly that helps them grow their business. They're part of a community of other franchisees doing the same thing. And everyone's in a Teams chat all day long, helping each other out. And then, I have a whole marketing department that helps generate leads for them and provide support. So they're essentially buying into a business where they have 27 corporate staff to support them in different levels, which allows them to skip 34 years of trial and error that our founders had to do. Um,
And
and
so
then
most of them are
and
basically they're like big sort of like B2B salespeople who have that experience and can just go in and try to close deals. Would you say that's kind of
Yeah, we actually don't require B2B sales experience because it's not hard. All of the leads are warm. So
right?
it's like someone who needs the property clean, and all we have to do is show up and be the most professional company and have it together the most, which due to the fragmentation in the power washing industry, that's not been difficult. Um, and so we've been able to capture commercial market share. I mean, we're 60 to 70% commercial in a lot of the markets we're entering.
Right.
And it took our founders 28 years to get any foothold in the commercial side of the business. So but yes, I mean that is an element of the business that the business owners, the franchisees have to be comfortable with, is being in their community and talking to people and shaking hands and going to BNIs and going to Chamber of Commerce and like showing up to go sit down with the painter who manages an $8 million painting company. Like that is what the owners are going to be spending most of their time, at least initially doing. Now they could have a business partner who does that for them, but like that's a big piece of the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I'm curious with, obviously hiring this general manager and training is super important. What
Yeah.
kind of, and I think it's important for, people, whether it's like people going to the franchise space or buying a business like an ETA sort of a model. What is, I guess, what kind of advice you give them in terms of or strategies maybe to find this GM in training?
So what we do is we just pay them better and treat them better than anywhere else they're going to go work. Um, and I mean, with the economics of the business, it doesn't matter to pay someone a difference of $3 to $4 more per hour with the way the economics of our business works out, because we're also like looking at this from like a longer time horizon. Like the buyers, the franchisees are coming in like they're not one truck guys who just want to draw a salary from one truck. Like they're not quitting till they get to 5 to 10 to 15 trucks. And then even then, like our buyers, our franchisees are goalpost movers. Like when they get to 10 trucks, they're gonna be like, who do I need to go acquire to get to 20?
Love
So
that.
yeah, so like I mean, recruiting is a huge piece of business. It's not just the general manager and training that you're going to need to hire and incentivize well. You're going to need to hire salespeople. You're going to need to hire technicians, and you need to build a culture that um, these employees want to fit kind of their own dreams within, right? And the other advantage we have is a lot of the other business owners that would be hiring these general managers and training or these technicians are blue collar individuals themselves, right? And and a lot of the people, I mean, almost all the people we brought in are kind of coming from like a more white collar background.
Right.
And um there's like a mentality with blue collar laborers. It's very like kind of pride driven and there's some ego in it. And like I'm sure you've experienced this in some of the acquisitions. You meet these founders and like it's just there's just a different mentality. And we train our franchisees to kind of treat these employees, especially the technicians, like we're a mother to them. Like they are typically coming from like a relatively inconsistent background. Like they have, they're maybe living to paycheck, they have child support, like, and so we just provide a very consistent workplace with very clear guardrails, and then we pay them better and treat them better than anyone else. And they know exactly what happens when they go outside the guardrails. And so, what I would say is for anyone who's going in the service industry or looking to acquire businesses in the service industry, expect that your employees will leave or that you will have to fire them, because that's just the nature of blue collar trades work. So consistently recruit on the back end, regardless of whether not you need it. Three employees is two. Two employees is one. You don't ever want to have one employee, so that means you need to have three employees at least. And
That
so these are the things that we try to train our franchisees on is and invest in the team members before you need them. That's what we've done really well at Rolling Suds corporate. And so we try to impart that kind of wisdom upon our franchisees.
No, that's great advice. Regardless whether you're a franchisee, you're just a business owner, you're trying to start a business, that's great advice. I'm curious, I guess, on the franchisor level, the corporate level for you, you raised some capital early on to hire people. At what point, do you expect to be profitable or maybe you guys are already? What does that look like for you?
We've been profitable since the first month that we started selling franchises. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, so I mean, we've uh the way that franchising works is really interesting. A lot of people don't understand like the economics on the back end, so I'll try to give some color.
Love
There are
that.
franchise fees that franchisees pay, and that's to buy the area. Uh, if they the expectation or the understanding is that the franchisor, excuse me, has enough money from those franchise fees to invest in infrastructure for growth. Depending on how the franchisor sells franchises, that may not always be the case. Because if they hire an outsourced sales organization that's heavily relying on franchise brokers, they might only have a fraction of that franchise fee left over after they sell. So what that means is they need more capital, right? They need more like a larger tranche of capital to support franchisees. Um, because of my background, we did franchise sales in house. In fact, I did them. So I hired for everything else, and all 51 of those franchisees, from the intro call to actually signing the agreement, I took them through the process, which allowed us to build the framework and kind of set the expectation of who comes into our system and who doesn't. And as a result of me doing that, I had to hire for every other role really, really well, right? Like I had to hire leaders that could lead people. And so it ended up working out really well. And we have been profitable. I mean, in the first 9 months of operation, we did over $5 million.
Wow.
Um, in the first quarter of this year, we did three. So this allows us to have the capital to grow the franchise system the right way. So for anyone who's considering buying a franchise, whomever they talk to on the front end, they need to ask a few questions. What relationship do you have, Mr. Person that's selling me the franchise, to the business? Um, and are you part of the franchise? Are you a sales organization? Um, because that's really going to depend upon how much money that franchisor needs to have outside of that, right? And with the way the franchise agreements work is you can go look at their balance sheet and the franchise disclosure document. Franchises are really heavily regulated. So you can ask these questions to make sure that those systems are in place. Because again, keep in mind, until we get all these franchisees open and profitable with multiple trucks on the road, there's not a ton of royalty revenue coming in. So that's why franchising is so capital intensive. The other question I would ask as a prospective franchisee is, what's your experience in franchising? How long have you been franchising? What are your goals? Why are you doing this? Because franchising is really hard. Like if they're talking to someone who has a painting business, or they're talking to someone who has an epoxy coatings business or whatever, like that person's got to be ready to step away from the business that they love and go into a business that they know nothing about, which is the franchise business. And they're going to burn cash while they make mistakes. And so it's a tough business that people don't really understand. And so my goal with the content that I put out and a lot of the stuff that I create, um, is to kind of educate both franchisees and franchisors about the industry and how to do it if they're going to do it the right way. Um, and that's really resonated with a lot of prospective franchisors and prospective franchisees.
No, that's super interesting. I guess for you guys, um, I guess right now, most of your cash coming in is from people paying you guys the franchise fees at sort of, I don't know if scale is the right word at, let's say a year or two from now, what will that split be ideally? Or ideally, what is the split for a franchisor on those initial franchise fees versus the royalties?
It's hard to say because it depends on how much white space is available with the brand. 2 years from now, we will have very little white space available. Um, I mean, there's 800-900 really good territories probably across the country, but like 2 years from now, the Dallas Fort Worth will be gone, the Houston, Texas will be gone, Florida, majority of Florida will be gone. Like these areas that any good franchise system usually sells out
Yep.
first, right? So part of the reason why we've been so selective with who comes in is we're not trying to sell a territory to a person who just wants like one truck as like a lifestyle business, and like he's going to have his son go run it and like he's going to go open other businesses. Like that's not our buyer. We're looking for people who are like long-term investor operators who can scale teams and potentially buy other markets or add other trucks or like really grow kind of a massive enterprise. Um, So if the plan works 2 to 3 years from now, which my expectation is that it will, the majority of our cash flow will come from royalties, and the royalties will pay for the infrastructure of the business. And that is where anyone who starts a franchise really wants to get to, right? Because if you've got a business where the recurrent monthly recurring revenue or the annual recurring revenue pays for the infrastructure of the business, then anything above that is used to either reinvest into growth, where that business needs to go next. It's used for distributions. It's used for, and that's ultimately like where every franchise system, I mean, that's the goal of every franchisor, is to get there. And I believe we'll be there in about two-ish years.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense why you're looking for these really experienced and quality operators. You're really relying on them to do well, for you guys to do well, 2 years from now. So
Right, exactly. And a lot of people say like you're getting sold a franchise. And my thought is like we're partners. if if I'm not selling, in fact, I talk more people out of buying the franchise than I do buying it, because I'm like, it's going to be really hard. You're starting a business from scratch. It's going to be, normally it would be a lot more lonely, but now you've got us and you've got a community, but like it's still going to be hard. And we're going to make it less hard than it would be if you went to go start it on your own. But like, it's not, as you know, starting a business from scratch isn't for the faint of heart. Um, but if they come in with the expectation that we are partners, and this is exactly what it's going to take to get the business to that next level and to kind of grow it, when they're all in, um, I think that we all have like really good chance for success.
no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's also just great advice in terms of like kind of like a reality check for people too, like you have to know what you're getting into before you, invest
Right.
your money and your time. So that makes a lot of sense. I know we're, about at time now, but Aaron, any sort of final words of wisdom, especially for, the first time entrepreneurs out there?
So, for first time entrepreneurs and people that are specifically looking at the kind of entrepreneurship through acquisition space, I think that, and this could just be in my experience, but I think there's a lot of first time entrepreneurs that are like looking for some kind of like element of like a passive business where they buy a business with like a management team in place, and like they're not going to have to work as much because there's like a leader and this and that. The absolute hardest thing to do in a transaction is replace the founder. That's why so many mid-market or just in general M&A transactions are structured in a way to keep the founder on through the transition, right?
Yep.
And so if someone is buying a business that exists and the founder is exiting and there's maybe a management team in place, there should be zero expectation that that's going to be a passive business to start. In my mind, I don't think that that exists.
I completely agree.
I don't think it. So I just like anyone who like has this assumption, like graduated with my MBA from Duke, I know exactly how to run a business. I'm going to go buy a transportation business with a management team in place, and then I'm just going to build a hold co with 10 businesses. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for them to know that, because then if they say, all right, if that's not going to happen, do I really want to do this? Um, and if the answer is still yes, and they know they're going to work 80 hours a week, start with that business that they bought, figuring out how to replace the founder, then go buy that 2 or 7 million, you know, personally guaranteed SBA loan and buy it. Or take a little bit less risk, find a brand that you think that you believe in and that you could grow and scale it, because in my mind it's going to be just as hard. Like you're still going to have to work a ton to try to figure things out. With an existing business, you don't know if the manager's going to leave. You don't know if the founder's going to compete against you. I mean, there's so many things that are up in the air. And there's so many things that are up in the air with finding the right franchise brand too, because there are a lot of bad ones out there. In fact, there's more bad ones than good ones. But I think my just general advice to a first time entrepreneur is it's going to be really hard and it's going to take everything out of you. Um, and so just know that going into it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I always tell people, if you expect it to be 100% fully absentee, this is probably not the right path for you. And
Right.
you're going to have to work hard either way. So Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to end things. Aaron, thank you so much. I guess one last question. If people want to reach out, where can they find you?
So if they're interested in becoming a franchisee, just go to rollingsudsfranchise.com and then just submit to request information and you'll get on the phone with someone from my development team. And then I just put out a ton of content on Twitter and LinkedIn predominantly, but I do have videos that go out every day on Instagram as well. So my Twitter's Aaron Harper, CEO. Instagram's Aaron T as in Timothy Harper. And then you can just search Aaron Harper Rolling Suds and you can get me on LinkedIn. So I try to just put out as much free content as possible on franchising to help people know what they're getting into and what the right things to do are and how to avoid pitfalls and mistakes. So I just try to add as much value, but also educate on just franchising in general.
No, that's great, Aaron. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was great, and I'm sure a bunch of people will be reaching out, and I'm sure a lot of people, learned a lot from this as well. So thank you again, and
Thank
yeah,
you.
really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.